realized she hadn't just stolen my idea. She'd stolen me. My name is Ethan Vale, 32, Senior Marketing Strategist at Echelon Dynamics, a billion-dollar tech firm that prides itself on innovation, loyalty, and image. Ironically, those were the three things my colleague, and once, my closest friend Samantha Rhodes never truly understood. When I joined Echelon 6 years ago, Samantha was already there, ambitious, magnetic, the kind of woman who could make a crowded boardroom hang on her every word. We started as equals, brainstorming campaigns late into the night, finishing each other's pitches like two halves of the same creative brain. She was the spark, I was the structure. She dreamed big, I made it happen. We were unstoppable until she realized there was only room for one name on the top of the org chart. It started small. A shared presentation here, a compliment there. You're the brains, Ethan. I'm just the voice. She'd say, laughing as if flattery could erase the imbalance. I believed her because I wanted to. We were partners not romantically, but professionally. We trusted each other like soldiers in a trench. Then came the Phoenix Project, a bold, high-stakes campaign that would decide the next executive director of marketing. The CEO himself, Richard Kellen, had personally requested fresh ideas after the company's last product launch tanked. This was it, the golden ticket. For weeks, Samantha and I lived in that glass, walled office, takeout boxes piled high, whiteboards covered in sketches, midnight coffee runs. It wasn't just work anymore, it was obsession. She'd smile across the table, eyes blazing with determination, and say, "Ethan, if this works, we'll finally get the recognition we deserve." I didn't realize we was temporary. 2 days before the presentation, Samantha texted me, "Emergency meeting with Kellen, just got the call. Don't worry, I'll mention you." It didn't seem strange at the time. She was the more charismatic one, the one who could talk numbers and dreams in the same breath. I trusted her completely. The next morning, I walked into the office to find everyone staring at me, whispering. The internal memo hit my inbox at 9:17 a.m. Congratulations to Samantha Rhodes, new Executive Director of Marketing. Her innovative Phoenix campaign has been approved for global rollout. My name was nowhere. I remember standing by the glass wall of the conference room, watching Samantha across the floor. She was shaking hands with Kellen, smiling for the cameras, accepting praise for the concept I'd built line by line. She caught my eye for half a second, that flicker of guilt or maybe triumph. It was hard to tell. Then looked away. That night, I didn't go home. I sat at my desk long after everyone had left, staring at the presentation slides on my laptop. My work, my late nights, my words, every headline, every tagline, every piece of the campaign had my fingerprint on it. Even the phrase the CEO quoted on stage. Rebirth through innovation. My line, I opened my drafts folder and found something else, a second version of the campaign file, the one she'd renamed SR Final Presentation. No mention of me. The next few weeks were a blur of polite congratulations, forced smiles, and Samantha's new office door closing whenever I walked by. She'd stop me in the hallway sometimes, pretending nothing had changed. "Ethan, I couldn't have done it without you. You'll get your chance too, I promise." I learned that people who say, "I promise," rarely mean it. She invited me to her promotion dinner. At the executive lounge, I declined. I couldn't sit across from her pretending everything was fine while she toasted to my success. Instead, I stayed late again, reviewing new project briefs. The CEO had assigned me to support Samantha on her next major campaign. Support as in be her shadow again. That was when something shifted in me, not anger, not yet, just a quiet, heavy unease. I started noticing things. Emails between her and Kellen that were oddly personal. Unscheduled strategy meetings in his private office. Late-night calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. I told myself I didn't care, that I was done. But deep down, I felt something darker forming, coiling around the edges of my patience. She'd used me to climb higher. But what she didn't realize was that I had learned exactly how the system worked, and I was going to use it better than she ever could. That was how the cracks began to show. A week after Samantha's promotion, the air at Echelon Dynamics shifted. You could feel it. The hum of conversation changed pitch. The glances lingered a bit too long, and suddenly everyone was walking on glass. And in the center of it all stood Samantha Rhodes, no longer my equal, but my superior. Her new office sat at the far end of the executive corridor, where the glass walls turned opaque at the touch of a button. I still had my same cubicle, the one with a flickering monitor and a view of the coffee machine. At first, she pretended nothing had changed. "Ethan, can you drop by for 5 minutes? I just need your input on the launch analytics." 5 minutes always turned into an hour. And every time I left her office, she had another idea. Another plan that needed a little polish. Mine. Always mine. The first red flag came during a Thursday meeting with the CEO, Richard Kellen. Samantha was presenting updates on the Phoenix project's rollout. Sleek charts, confident tone, all the right buzzwords. She ended with, "And with Ethan's help, we've refined the customer segmentation plan." A pause, just long enough for the CEO to nod approvingly. But I noticed something. She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at Kellen, and he smiled in that slow, deliberate way that said there's more between us than work. By Friday, rumors had started floating, not cruel ones, just whispers in the break room. "Did you hear? Samantha's been in Kellen's office 3 times today. She's ambitious, can't blame her." Still, that's fast, isn't it? I tried to ignore it. Gossip feeds on envy, and she had earned a lot of attention. Still, something didn't sit right. Her tone when she talked to me had shifted, polite, clipped, transactional. The warmth was gone. Our friendship had become conditional. That night, I worked late again, cleaning up her campaign presentation for the next executive round. She'd left early for a client dinner, she said, around 11:00 p.m. I passed by the CEO office to drop off some printed briefs and froze. Through the frosted glass, I could see shadows, 2 silhouettes, hers and Kellen's, laughter again. Closer this time, the rational part of me whispered that it was harmless, a post-meeting chat. But the silence that followed was too long, too intimate. I turned and walked away. The second red flag was subtler: money. Echelon had this unspoken rule: promotions come slow, but perks come fast. The week after her new title, Samantha traded her modest sedan for a sleek, black BMW. Then came the designer wardrobe, the new jewelry, the weekend work trips to the city, all paid for apparently out of pocket. When I asked casually about it, she laughed. "Ethan, don't tell me you still live by spreadsheets. Think bigger. You can't win if you keep playing small." It wasn't the words, it was the tone, arrogant, detached, like she was already speaking a different language. But the biggest red flag, the files. Late one night, while reviewing the marketing data for Phoenix, I noticed something strange: duplicated folders with subtle changes. Reports labeled Q3 Original and Q3 Executive Copy. The original had accurate numbers, the executive copy had inflated ones. Click rates, revenue projections, all slightly exaggerated. Enough to impress, but not enough to trigger suspicion. The metadata said they'd been edited by Samantha. My stomach sank. I stared at the screen hoping I'd made a mistake. I hadn't. She was cooking the results, not by much. Just enough to shine brighter under the CEO's spotlight. I printed one of the reports and locked it in my drawer. A quiet insurance policy. Over the next few weeks, my unease grew. Samantha started hosting strategy dinners, small gatherings with senior staff that I was never invited to. When I asked her about it, she smiled faintly. "Oh, those are just informal brainstorms, Ethan. You wouldn't enjoy them. Too political." Political? It was the first time she'd ever admitted that the job was more about who you impressed than what you achieved. Still, I told myself to let it go. Maybe she was just adapting faster. Maybe I was jealous, but then came the budget meeting. She'd asked me to prepare the annual marketing spend summary. A 3-week data crunch, meticulous and exhausting. I turned in the report Friday morning. Monday, she presented it, but not as mine. My name had been removed from the document header. Her initials replaced it. "Sorry, Ethan," she said afterward, catching my expression. "Kellen thought it would be cleaner if all reports came under my office now. You understand." I did. Too well. That night, I sat alone in the empty break room, staring at my reflection in the vending machine glass. There was exhaustion in my face, the kind that comes from being overlooked so often you start to doubt your own worth. Was I paranoid, or was she systematically erasing me? By the end of the quarter, the transformation was complete. Samantha was now a fixture at every executive function. Kellen praised her in every briefing. She'd become the golden child. And me, I was invisible again. Except I wasn't the same anymore. Some nights, I'd scroll through my old presentation notes and wonder, how many times had she rehearsed my words in front of him? How many compliments, ideas, insights of mine had she used to impress him behind closed doors? I didn't have proof of an affair, or favoritism, or corruption. Not yet, but I knew manipulation when I saw it. And I knew I was done playing the supporting role in her story. The next time Samantha asked me for help, I'd already started my own quiet campaign, one she'd never see coming. It happened on a Thursday morning, the kind that begins with burnt coffee, broken printers, and a sense that something wrong is in the air. I didn't know it yet, but that day would shatter the last of my loyalty to Samantha Rhodes. I was buried in data analytics for the new Phoenix expansion when a company-wide email lit up my screen. Internal announcement. Strategic partnership with Kellen Group. We're proud to announce an exclusive collaboration with Kellen Group, led by our CEO, Richard Kellen, and Echelon's Executive Director of Marketing, Samantha Rhodes. There was a photo attached. Kellen and Samantha standing side by side, hands clasped in a firm handshake, smiles bright under studio lights. But it wasn't the partnership that made my chest tighten. It was the presentation deck in her hands. The title slide read, Project Helios, Vision by Samantha Rhodes. Helios. That was my code name for a concept I'd been quietly developing for months. A next-gen AI-driven marketing automation tool. No one knew about it except me. I hadn't even saved it on the shared drive. My laptop froze for a second as I stared at the photo. My throat went dry. She had my project. I opened my personal files. The folder was still there. /private/Helios prototype/. But something was wrong. Several files were missing: the key data models, the presentation script, the concept summary. Gone. I checked the access logs, last opened 2 weeks ago. By Samantha Rhodes at echelon.com. My hand trembled over the mouse. 2 weeks ago, she'd borrowed my laptop for a quick email during a client briefing. She'd smiled, thanked me, and handed it back like nothing had happened. Now I understood why. She hadn't just used my work once, she'd built her entire career on it. I stormed down the hallway to her office, every step echoing like a drumbeat in my skull. The glass walls turned opaque before I even reached her door. She was inside. I could hear her voice, low and confident. I waited. After a few minutes, the door slid open. Samantha appeared, immaculate as always, tailored navy dress, calm smile, not a hair out of place. "Ethan," she said, surprised but composed. "Everything okay?" I held up my phone, the company announcement glowing on the screen. "Where did you get the Helios files?" Her expression flickered, just for a second. Then came the practiced smile. "Helios, oh, that concept we discussed ages ago. I just expanded on it. Disgust, I snapped. That was my prototype, Samantha. You had no right to take it. She sighed, a soft, patronizing sound. Ethan, you're overreacting. Ideas evolve. I only polished what you started. Polished. She'd erased my name, my work, and my effort, and called it polishing. I felt something inside me fracture. You used me, I said quietly, every step of the way. You used me to impress him. Her lips curved just slightly. That's how the game works, Ethan. You're talented, I'll give you that. But talent without ambition is wasted. I did what I had to do. There it was. The truth, sharp, simple, cruel. And the CEO? I asked. You're just impressing him too. Her eyes hardened. Watch your tone. Then she walked past me, confident, unshaken, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and betrayal. I didn't go back to my desk. I walked straight out of the building, past the lobby guards, and through the revolving doors into the cold city air. Anger burned through my veins like acid, not just at her, at myself, for letting it happen. I had been the architect of her success story, the silent author, the ghost behind the curtain, and now she was building empires with my blueprints. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every late-night meeting, every compliment, every laugh. All of it strategy. I opened my old messages. There it was, a text from her months ago. You're the reason this company works. One day they'll see that. They had seen it through her. At 2:47 a.m., I logged back into the system, pulling every file, every email, every backup copy I'd ever sent her. Then I saw it buried in her shared folder, a confidential memo. To Board of Directors from Samantha Rhodes. Subject: Strategic Leadership Transition Proposal. I clicked it open, my breath catching. She was pitching herself for the vice president position, a step below CEO. Her proposal listed key assets, including her strategic partnership with Richard Kellen and the Helios Initiative, conceptualized and led under her supervision. There was even a paragraph suggesting I transition into a data analysis role, citing my limited leadership capabilities. Limited. The same person who'd spent years relying on my structure now considered me replaceable. I sat there staring at the screen, the words blurring, rage mixed with disbelief until I couldn't tell them apart. The next morning, I went to work as if nothing had happened. Samantha was already in, laughing with the CEO outside his office. She looked radiant, confident, untouchable. She caught my eye, smiled, and said, "Morning, Ethan. Ready for another productive day?" Something in me snapped. "Yeah," I said slowly, "more productive than you'll ever expect." She tilted her head, curious, but I just smiled back. Because beneath the surface, something had changed. The heartbreak was still there, raw and pulsing, but behind it was something new. Cold, precise. I had spent years helping her rise. Now I would learn how to bring her down quietly, methodically, and with the same elegance she used to destroy me. That night, as the office lights dimmed and the city shimmered outside, I began the first draft of a different project. Not a campaign, not a marketing pitch, a takeover plan. And when it was done, when every piece was in place, Samantha Rhodes would finally understand what it felt like to be used. The morning after I discovered Samantha's betrayal, I woke up before dawn. For a while, I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the skyline through my apartment window. It was raining, a soft, rhythmic drops against the glass. The same way it had rained the night I'd first pitched the Helios idea to her. Back then, I believed we were a team. Now all I could think was how naive that version of me had been. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I was the night before. Anger is loud, it burns bright, then fades. What I felt now was quieter, heavier resolve. I realized something in that silence. She hadn't just stolen my project. She'd stolen the version of me that believed in fairness, and I wanted him back. The day began like any other: emails, deadlines, fake smiles. But something inside me had shifted. When Samantha called me into her office for a quick update, I walked in calm, composed, unreadable. She was on the phone with the CEO when I entered. Her tone was soft, almost playful. I noticed how easily she could change it from commanding to charming in a breath. "Yes, Richard," she said, twirling a pen between her fingers. "Ethan's handling the data refinements. Don't worry, I've got him right where I need him." The words hit me like a punch. Right where I need him. She didn't even pause when she saw me standing there. She just smiled, hung up, and said sweetly, "Oh, Ethan, you don't mind staying late tonight, do you? We need to finalize the numbers before Monday." I nodded, not because I agreed, but because in that moment something clicked. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was exploitation, and I wasn't going to let her win anymore. That night, when everyone else left, I stayed behind not to work for her, but to start reclaiming what was mine. I opened the Helios backup on my personal drive, the original one she hadn't found, and began rebuilding. Code, concepts, data models. I labeled each file meticulously, time-stamped, and backed up to an encrypted folder she couldn't touch. But this time, I wasn't designing just a marketing concept. I was designing my comeback. I knew Echelon's systems better than anyone, how the board thought, how the CEO operated, how numbers moved across departments. I'd spent years making other people look good. Now I would turn that same skill inward. Every report I'd ever written, every campaign I'd structured, every success she'd taken credit for, it all had my digital fingerprints. And one by one, I began collecting them, not out of spite, out of strategy. A week later, the company held a quarterly results briefing. The CEO, Kellen, opened the meeting with his usual charm, praising growth, thanking the leadership team. And then, of course, he singled out Samantha. "Samantha's vision has truly elevated this company," he said. "Her leadership on the Helios partnership has been remarkable." Applause filled the room. I didn't clap. Samantha looked radiant at the head of the table, confident, composed. And then she caught my eye, smiling just a little too knowingly. It was meant to intimidate me. Instead, it centered me. Because while she was basking in borrowed glory, I was already laying the groundwork to take it all back. The trigger came 2 days later. I was leaving the office late again when I heard voices from the executive conference room, muffled but unmistakable. I recognized Samantha's tone instantly, confident, controlled. Then I heard my name. "He's useful, Richard, but not leadership material," she was saying. "He lacks the presence. I'll manage him until the transition is complete." "You think he'll stay quiet?" Kellen asked. "He always does," she said with a soft laugh. "That's why I keep him close." Something in me snapped, but not like before. Not with rage or despair. This time it was cold, focused, final. I turned and walked away, my steps measured, my pulse steady. If she thought I'd always stay quiet, she didn't know me at all. That weekend I didn't rest. I worked not for her, but for myself. I began compiling a new presentation, Helios, the True Vision. It included timestamps, version histories, draft comparisons, and digital logs that traced the idea from my computer to hers. I built a case professional, irrefutable, bulletproof, and then I did something that surprised even me. Instead of planning to expose her immediately, I decided to wait. Because revenge wasn't about striking fast. It was about striking right. If I wanted to reclaim my name and the CEO respect, I had to play smarter than she ever had. So I started showing up early, volunteering for projects she ignored, quietly fixing her mistakes before they reached upper management. People began to notice. Whispers replaced whispers. Ethan handled that client fallout. Ethan stayed late to fix the forecast errors. Ethan's report saved us from a PR mess. The same gossip mill that had once fueled her rise was beginning to shift its focus, and she noticed. One evening, as we crossed paths near the elevators, Samantha stopped me. "You've been working late a lot lately," she said, watching me closely. "So have you," I replied. "I just hope you're not overextending yourself." "Don't worry," I said. "I've learned to pace myself." There was an edge in my voice that made her hesitate just long enough for me to see it. The flicker of unease. For the first time, she was unsure. That night, as I packed my bag, I looked at the city lights through the window, each one like a spark of the power I'd given away. And I realized something. The real revenge wasn't just taking back what she'd stolen. It was proving that I never needed her to begin with. She had used me to impress the CEO. But I was about to show them both who the real architect of Echelon's success was. The pain had turned into fuel. The betrayal had become blueprint. And the man she thought she could control was about to build his own empire, starting from the ashes she left behind. That's how I thought of it as I sat in my car outside the office one rainy Wednesday, watching the lights of Echelon's lobby blur into streaks. The plan wasn't born in a moment of fury. It grew from a checklist, methodical, legal, and unassailable. If Samantha had built her throne on my work and whispered lies, I would build my case brick by brick until the board could no longer ignore the truth. I started where every good forensic trail begins: the metadata. Over years at Echelon, I'd learned the back channels, how drafts are auto-saved, how version histories quietly timestamp who edited what and when. I spent nights crawling through old drives, pulling archived versions of Helios, comparing timestamps, hashing files to prove lineage. Each comparison showed the clear progression of the concept from my earliest drafts to the polished deck Samantha presented. But digital files alone felt cold. I needed witnesses. I reached out to Jonah, an old contractor who'd helped me prototype the Helios algorithm in a freelance capacity. He remembered the late night debug sessions, the whiteboard sketches with my name in the corner. Jonah agreed to notarize an affidavit, it confirming the project's origins and the dates we'd collaborated. Small things, but in a boardroom, small things add up. While scanning her shared folders, I found the executive copy with inflated metrics. I printed side-by-side comparisons, original analytics vs. executive numbers. I saved email headers showing Samantha's access to my private folder the day key files went missing. I recorded times she'd claimed client dinners that matched up with access logs showing she'd been logged into my workstation. I also kept receipts, the designer purchases, the sudden luxury upgrades. I noted dates and correlated them with the timeline of her meteoric rise. Not to shame her lifestyle, but to show the board the pattern. Sudden perks, sudden access, sudden promotion, and the coinciding disappearance of proprietary work. Revenge is easier when you're not the only one asking questions. Quietly, I started planting seeds. HR had a confidential whistleblower channel. I had never used it, but I knew how seriously the board took compliance flags. I prepared a measured, professional complaint, no venom, only facts and evidence, and submitted it anonymously at first, attaching the document comparisons and access logs. Simultaneously, I reconnected with Meyer in product, a senior manager who'd always respected my analytical rigor. I didn't accuse Samantha outright. I asked Maya for a favor, to review a set of anonymized drafts and give feedback on lineage and originality. She did, and her notes confirmed what I suspected. The core architecture and spirit of Helios matched my early prototypes. I didn't want a bludgeon. I wanted elegant exposure. A situation where Samantha would reveal more of herself by trying to defend the very thing she'd stolen. So I built a staged vulnerability. I proposed a Helios expansion workshop to the leadership team, framed as a collaborative review to prepare for external partners. Everyone loved collaboration. Samantha accepted immediately. After all, the workshop would cement her leadership over Helios. I volunteered to co-host, publicly humble, privately strategic. The workshop's agenda was a calculated sequence: walkthrough of timelines, live review of version histories, and a Q&A around data integrity. I requested access to the system logs in advance under the guise of preparing a technical appendix. When IT raised an eyebrow, I smiled and invoked my years leading data-driven projects. They granted the access. After all, I was supporting Samantha's initiative. I also seeded a decoy, an early draft saved in a read-only folder with a visible last edited by Ethan Vale tag, then made sure Samantha could access it publicly during the workshop. It wasn't tampering, it was transparency. If she tried to claim authorship on live review, the records would show otherwise. While the evidence accumulation felt satisfying, the real battle was reputational. Samantha still moved like a queen: dinners with Kellen, keynote mentions, smiles for the cameras. I needed perception to tilt without shouting, so I let my work speak. I fixed client errors she'd pushed down to me. I produced a crisp, error-free follow-up to a marketing misstep that had briefly threatened Echelon's Q3 numbers, the very sort of thing that executive teams value. My name started popping up in appreciative emails from clients and mid-level execs. People began asking who did that. The answer, increasingly, was me. Throughout, Samantha wore her confidence like armor. She bragged about partnership gains, suggested I'd chosen to stay in a support role, and flirted with Kellen's favors openly. The board was impressed. For now, everything led to the workshop day. I crafted my presentation carefully: factual, unemotional, chronological. Version heat maps, contract dates, Jonah's affidavit, Maya's technical notes, side-by-side analytics. A neutral tone that let the evidence do the talking. But I also prepared contingency. If Samantha tried to deflect, I'd bring up the HR complaint, not as an accusation, but as a formal request for an independent audit. If the CEO tried to defend her on the basis of leadership presence, I'd ask for clarification on governance policies and intellectual property ownership. I would force the discussion into the frameworks the board respected. Most importantly, I kept my face calm. People make mistakes when they let emotions run the meeting. I planned to be cold, unflappable, and professional, the perfect opposite of the melodrama Samantha thrived on. In the days before the workshop, Samantha was unstoppable in appearance. She posted team photos. Her office door stayed closed less and less now with her assistant inside. And Kellen publicly praised her in a newsletter. She was still in control, or so she believed. On the morning of the workshop, the sky was clear. I arrived early, laptop in hand, heart steady. The room filled with the usual faces: senior execs, the CEO, a few board members on video. Samantha walked in last, radiant and assured. She took the head of the table and smiled like a victor. Everything was set. The evidence was ready. The trap was laid. And from where I sat, the next move would decide not only our careers, but who owned the story of Helios. The Helios expansion workshop was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. sharp. By 8:30, I was already there, laptop set, projector connected, the first slide glowing on the screen: Helios, evolution, and integrity. The boardroom was glass, walled, overlooking the city. The skyline shimmered under the morning sun, the same way it had the day Samantha stole my work and smiled as if it had always been hers. Today, that same light would expose her. By 8:55, the key players arrived: CEO Kellen Rhodes in his tailored navy suit, CFO Miranda, HR Director Chloe, and 3 board members dialing in from the East Coast. Samantha entered last, heels clicking like gunfire, her white suit immaculate, confidence radiating. She greeted everyone with that practiced ease: "Let's make this efficient, team. We have investors waiting for the updated rollout." Her tone said it all. This was her stage. She had no idea she was about to walk straight into the spotlight I'd built for her downfall. I stood when Kellen nodded for me to begin. Before we dive into projections, I've prepared a short timeline review, I said calmly. Samantha gave me a cursory glance, polite, dismissive. Of course, Ethan helped during the early phases. He's great with documentation. The word documentation almost made me laugh. She had no idea. The first few slides were harmless product iterations, dates, team rosters. I walked the room through the growth of Helios from a concept into a prototype. Then I clicked to slide 8, version lineage overview. The screen filled with timestamps, file names, and edit histories. This section shows the version trail. I explained. It identifies the sequence of development and authorship metadata for each major revision. Kellen leaned forward. You mean like who made which changes? Exactly. Samantha's smile faltered slightly. Ethan, do we need to get that technical right now? Everyone knows who led the final build. I agree. I replied evenly. Everyone should know who contributed clearly. Then I clicked to the next slide. A split-screen comparison. On the left, my original Helios architecture sketch dated 2 years prior. On the right, Samantha's presentation deck, same design, identical phrasing, just rebranded. The room went silent. I let the silence stretch long enough for discomfort to spread. Finally, Kellen frowned. Samantha, this looks like collaboration. She cut in, a nervous laugh breaking the tension. We all work on things together. Ethan's early notes were just brainstorming. I nodded. Then perhaps you can explain why the version logs show these files were copied from my private drive using your credentials. Samantha blinked. That's not true. Actually, I said, advancing again. I deconfirmed access records during the internal audit request last month. A murmur rippled through the room. Her face tightened. What audit? I turned toward HR Director Chloe, the one I submitted through compliance. You'll find the documentation attached in your board packet. Kellen's expression shifted, not angry yet, but wary. Samantha, is that correct? I didn't know there was an audit. She stammered, glancing at Chloe, who silently nodded. The next slide displayed side-by-side financial entries, Samantha's bonuses and reimbursements, cross-referenced with client invoices citing Helios proprietary consulting. Here, I continued, are the dates where revenue was attributed to the Helios expansion. The problem is, the architecture license predates the executive release by 9 months, and under Echelon's policy, intellectual property created outside management approval defaults to the primary developer. Miranda, the CFO, looked up sharply. Meaning Ethan holds partial ownership. Samantha paled. That's ridiculous. I kept my tone measured. I'm not here for ownership. I'm here for acknowledgement and to ensure Echelon's board isn't misled by falsified credit. But I was lying. I wanted more than acknowledgement. I wanted justice to echo. Samantha suddenly slammed her palm on the table. This is a setup. He's been bitter ever since the promotion. He's manipulating old files to make me look bad. I didn't flinch. If that's true, you won't mind verifying the files in front of everyone. IT, could you please connect? 2 technicians entered, prearranged by HR. They mirrored the company drive onto the main screen, scrolling through file histories. Each timestamp, each commit, each edit bore my name, and the copied files showed hers. When the truth appeared on the monitor, bright, irrefutable, Samantha's shoulders sagged. Kellen's voice was cold now. Samantha, this is unacceptable. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The air felt electric. I could have stopped there, but real revenge is poetic. It has rhythm. Before we close, I said quietly, I'd like to share one last thing. I opened a short video, a screen recording of my early Zoom meetings with Jonah, our contractor. It showed my name on the file drafts, my voice discussing the framework, the one Samantha had called her visionary blueprint. The footage ended with the date, April 14, 2022. Months before she'd even joined the project. Silence again, but this time, thick, suffocating. Kellen leaned back, exhaling. I think we've seen enough. Samantha's mask cracked. You can't do this. I built this brand. I made Helios profitable. Kellen's tone was cutting. You built it on stolen work. HR voice followed, soft but firm. Samantha Hayes, per policy, you are suspended pending legal review and termination recommendation. The words hit her like a hammer. She stood frozen, then turned toward me, fury burning through humiliation. You think this makes you a hero? No, I said, closing my laptop, just honest. She stormed out, trembling. Destroyed the heels that once clicked like victory, now echoing like defeat down the glass corridor. After she left, the board stayed quiet for a long while. Then Kellen turned to me. Ethan will need someone to oversee Helios through the transition. You've proven you understand every layer of it. I met his gaze steadily. I'll do it, but this time properly. By evening, the company email went out. Effective immediately, Samantha Hayes has resigned from her position as executive director. Ethan Vale will assume interim leadership of the Helios program. Resigned, a polite word for ruined. I stood at the window of my new corner office that night. The city lights shimmered against the glass, just as they had on the night she betrayed me. But this time, the reflection looking back wasn't angry. It was calm, satisfied. Helios was mine again, and she, the woman who used me to impress the CEO, was now just another name erased from the glass walls of Echelon. 3 months after the Helios workshop, Echelon was a different company, and I was a different man. The walls that once carried Samantha's voice, her laughter, her fake praise, her meetings filled with power plays, now echoed with quiet respect. People stopped pretending not to notice me in hallways. Emails came with subject lines like requesting input from Ethan Vale and your review needed for final sign-off. Funny how the same work that was invisible under her shadow suddenly became visionary under my name. But this wasn't about pride anymore. It was about balance being restored. Samantha didn't go quietly. At first, she tried to fight back, leaking whispers to industry blogs that she'd been undermined by a jealous subordinate. But the truth travels faster when the evidence is clean. The board launched a full internal audit. Every file she'd ever touched was examined. Turns out Helios wasn't the only project she'd borrowed inspiration from. There were smaller thefts, design drafts, presentation slides, even budget proposals. Each one built the same story, a pattern of taking credit and rewriting history. The board had no choice. She wasn't just fired, she was blacklisted. Her name quietly vanished from Echelon's leadership page, from company newsletters, from every internal archive. A month later, industry whispers reached LinkedIn. Samantha Hayes removed from position amid intellectual property scandal. No company would touch her after that. The woman who once charmed CEO couldn't even get a call back from startups. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Watching her silence unfold online was enough. Her empire had collapsed not with flames, but with deletion. The morning I officially stepped into her office, I didn't smile. I stood at the same window where she used to rehearse her success speeches and stared at the skyline. The same skyline I used to watch from a cubicle, dreaming of just one chance to prove myself. Now that chance was mine. Under my leadership, Helios evolved cleaner, more transparent, more inclusive. I reinstated team credits in every report. I gave bonuses to the engineers and designers who had been overshadowed during Samantha's reign. People started calling Helios a model of ethical innovation. Investors loved it. The board praised it, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was working for someone. I was building something from integrity. Kellen, the CEO, approached me one afternoon after a quarterly review. You know, he said, we needed this reminder that talent doesn't always wear the loudest smile. I smiled faintly. Sometimes it just keeps working until the truth speaks for itself. He nodded. How would you feel about stepping into the role permanently? So that's how I became the director of product strategy at Echelon. The title Samantha once boasted about in her emails. Except mine came without manipulation. A few weeks later, I got an email from a recruitment agency. Subject line, reference request for Samantha Hayes, former Echelon executive. It felt surreal. They were asking me, the man she'd used, discarded, and betrayed, for a professional reference. I could have ignored it. I could have written something cruel, but revenge had already done its job. So I replied, Samantha Hayes worked at Echelon during the early development of Project Helios. She's a capable communicator, but struggles with ethical boundaries in collaborative environments. Polite, professional, devastatingly honest, that email I knew would seal her fate. Poetic justice isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's a calm sentence written with steady fingers. Life after betrayal is strange. You don't just heal, you evolve. For months, I'd been driven by the idea of revenge. But now that it was done, I found myself rediscovering what it meant to work without fear. I started mentoring new employees, the quiet ones, the ones who reminded me of myself back when no one listened. I told them, never let someone else narrate your story. Keep receipts. Keep calm, and when the time comes, let the truth be your loudest voice. Helios continued to grow. So did I. Sometimes late at night, when the office was empty and the city lights shimmered on the glass walls, I'd imagine her reflection standing behind me, still trying to smile, still trying to pretend she'd won, but then I'd look closer and realize she was gone and I was still here. 3 months later, I received an invitation, a business conference downtown. The keynote, Leadership Lessons from Corporate Resilience. I almost didn't go until I saw who was attending as a guest panelist. Samantha Hayes. Curiosity won. I went. She looked different, smaller somehow. The once perfect posture was gone, the confident tone replaced by something brittle. When she saw me in the audience, her face froze. When the moderator asked her about leadership integrity, she hesitated just for a moment. Then she looked down and muttered, "Integrity isn't about what you gain. It's about what you destroy when you lie." That was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get. And honestly, it was enough. I walked out halfway through her talk, not because I hated her, but because I didn't need to hear any more. I'd already lived the ending. If you're still watching this, if you've ever been betrayed, used, or made to feel small so someone else could shine, let this story be your reminder. She used me to impress the CEO, and I became the one the CEO trusted most. You don't need to become like them to win. You just need patience, proof, and purpose. Betrayal doesn't end you, it refines you. Drop a comment below if you've ever had someone take credit for your hard work. I want to hear your story. And if this hit close to home, subscribe, because more stories like this are coming. Stories where justice isn't just served,